Welcome back to Zara Recap. Today I will show you a suspenseful science fiction film from 2007 titled Sunshine. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. It's the year 2057, and mankind is facing annihilation because the sun is dying. 8 astronauts are chosen to board the spaceship Icarus I and carry a gigantic stellar bomb with the mass equivalent of Manhattan Island with the intent of reigniting the sun, but the spaceship gets lost before they can reach the star. Since they lose communication with Earth, after a certain point, nobody knows what has transpired to them. 7 years later, while Earth is freezing in a solar winter, a new crew of 8 is sent out in the Icarus II to try again. First, it's Searle, the ship's doctor and psychological officer, who has become fixated with watching the sun. He even asks the Icarus AI to adjust the observation room panel to allow him to see as much radiance as possible without burning himself. This is such an incredible experience for him that over dinner, he suggests doing it to the whole crew. The engineer James Mace, the pilot Cassie, biologist Corazon, the communications officer and second-in-command Harvey, the ship's captain Kenita, the navigator Trey, and the physicist in charge of the bomb Robert Kappa. But none of them are drawn to the idea. Kenita informs them that the solar wind reading is much higher than they'd expected at this distance, and soon they will be entering the dead zone, which means they won't be able to communicate with Earth anymore, so the crew should send home their final messages. Kappa records a video for his parents and his sister, telling them they can't contact him back, but they'll know if they've succeeded if the sun comes out by the time they get this message. However, he takes so long in recording this that there isn't any time left for his crewmates to do the same, and this infuriates Mace, who tries to initiate a fight with him. After the others separate them, Mace is sent to talk to Searle, who tells him he has lost track of time and recommends him 2 hours in the Earth room, which is a chamber that imitates their home in order to calm them down. Meanwhile, Kenita continues to watch the old transmissions sent by Pinbacker, the captain of Icarus I. While Corazon reassures him her garden is producing plenty of oxygen, and that's not the issue the previous crew had, Kenita is still worried, especially when he sees Pinbacker describe some damage his ship got as beautiful. A diversion is welcome, however, when Cassie discovers they're passing by Mercury, so the whole crew goes to the observation room to watch it. Sometime later, while testing comm systems, Harvey makes an important discovery, a transmission playing the emergency signal from the Icarus I, which is reaching them thanks to the ship reaching the dark side of Mercury and the iron content of the planet acting like an antenna. Icarus replicates the first ship's trajectory on the screen, and they realize nobody picked up the signal until now because it was veiled in the background light and noise since the Icarus I actually managed to get pretty close to the sun. The crew starts discussing if it would be a good idea to alter their trajectory and make contact with the Icarus I. Mace doesn't think it is a good idea because the mission is more crucial, and if they don't deliver their payload, everything dies. On the other hand, there may be survivors in the ship, plus additional oxygen and food they can use, and most importantly, an additional bomb that could give them a better chance at reviving the sun. Since they can't agree if the gamble is worth it or not, they leave the decision up to Kappa because he has the physics knowledge to know what is best. After calculating the math with Icarus, he decides the additional bomb is worth the risk and tells them to fly towards Icarus I. The ship leaves Mercury's orbit after Trey adjusts their trajectory, but he makes an error. He has forgotten to readjust the shields that protect the ship from the sun, causing damage to 4 panels which if not repaired could devastate the whole ship and kill the crew. Kenita and Kappa embark on a spacewalk to conduct repairs while Cassie guides them, orienting the damaged portion of the shield away from the sun and causing the loss of 2 protruding communications towers that are currently in use. However, this also causes the reflected light to damage the ship's oxygen garden and oxygen reserves to Corazon's dismay, who has to watch how O2 is released to extinguish the fire. They need to realign the shield, but this would endanger Kappa and Kenita, who are still not done with the repairs. Harvey and Cassie want to delay, but Mace reminds them that the priority is to protect the payload, and Kenita agrees with him. So as Icarus uses autopilot to correct the ship's rotation, Kenita sends Kappa back inside and selflessly sacrifices himself to fix the last panel. Moments later, Searle needs to administer sedatives to Trey, putting him in a catatonic state because the guilt is putting him at risk of suicide. As the second-in-command, Harvey becomes the new captain, and he informs the crew that after what happened to the garden, they don't have sufficient oxygen to get them to their delivery point, let alone survive the journey. So now they have no alternative but to try to make contact with the Icarus I and hope they can salvage enough to continue the journey. After everyone else goes to handle their tasks, Mace, Corazon, and Cassie have a chat in private, where Corazon informs them that their current oxygen levels would be adequate if they lose 3 people. Afterward, Cassie has a brief discussion with Kappa, confiding that she is afraid of dying, but he confesses he is not. Once Icarus II finally connects with Icarus I, Kappa, Searle, Mace, and Harvey go aboard to search the ship. Ignoring the fact that lights don't work and the ship is full of dust, which most likely is composed of human skin, they decide to split the group to search more effectively. Harvey finds the garden intact with 7 years of unchecked growth, which thrills Corazon, while Trey confirms the second bomb is fully operational, and Searle checks for water and food, finding plenty of both. Mace discovers all systems are operational as well, except he isn't receiving anything from the flight computer, and when he delves deeper into the files, a recording with a rambling message from Pinbacker starts playing. His face is scorched, and he mentions they've abandoned the mission because they shouldn't defy God. The transmission code is from 6.5 years ago, exactly the time they were supposed to deliver the payload. Mace keeps investigating for an explanation and finds out the mainframe has been tampered with, so they can't fly the Icarus I, officially rendering this detour completely futile. Meanwhile, Searle enters the observation room and finally finds the crew. All the bodies are sitting in front of the panel, having let the sun incinerate them to ashes. Suddenly, the two vessels explosively disconnect, destroying Icarus I's exterior airlock and marooning the 4 men as the Icarus II begins to drift away from them. They find only one suit they can use, so Mace and Searle agree to give it to Kappa, who has priority because he is the only one that knows how to operate the payload. Harvey protests against this, saying he should be the one with priority because he is the captain, but the others ignore his commands. However, Mace has one more idea that could save the rest of them. He takes insulation material from the walls of the ship to wrap themselves in it. This should be enough for them to withstand the cold while jumping from one ship to another. There's only one problem. Because the computer isn't functioning anymore, one of them must stay behind to open the hatch, and Searle agrees to sacrifice himself and be the one to do it. Once Cassie aligns both airlocks, Searle releases the airlock, and the other 3 men use the vacuum release for propulsion to jump between ships while holding on to each other. They are forced to let go, though, when they accidentally hit the ship on their way out, and only Kappa reaches the other airlock. Mace manages to hold onto a handrail, and thanks to this, Kappa is able to grab him and drag him inside with him, but Harvey drifts away and freezes, dying from asphyxiation. Back in Icarus I, Searle has accepted his fate, so he goes to the observation room and sits next to the bodies to let the sun burn him while Cassie says her goodbyes through the comms. After triple-checking the activity log, Mace is certain Icarus didn't disconnect the airlocks, and there wasn't a malfunction either, which means someone did it manually. Since the men were together in Icarus I and the women were together in Icarus II, the only remaining option is Trey. Kappa is doubtful because Trey is so deeply sedated, it is almost impossible for him to move enough to pull such a thing. Corazon also points out that now they have lost 2 breathers, only one more needs to go so they can survive the mission, and Mace agrees to be the one to kill Trey. Kappa thinks this insanity is probably what happened to Icarus I, but he still agrees to do it because the future of humanity is more important. Corazon also agrees, but Cassie doesn't, not that it matters much, since it's 3 against 1. Mace leaves the crew behind and enters the infirmary. After grabbing an electric scalpel, Mace checks the bed, but Trey isn't there. He is actually sitting in the Earth room, and he's already dead, having cut his own wrists. Mace calls the rest of the crew so they can see what happened, and once they are there, he blames the deaths on Kappa's decision to divert the mission and says the spilled blood should be his. Angry, Kappa tackles him and starts a fight, which doesn't last long because they struggle to breathe since the air is low. While checking on the payload, Kappa has Icarus run a check on the crew's biometrics and oxygen consumption, and Icarus informs him they are all going to die before delivering the payload because the oxygen is insufficient. When Kappa gets confused and says the remaining oxygen should be enough for 4 people, Icarus tells him there is a 5th unidentified person aboard, currently standing in the observation room. Kappa rushes there and finds the viewing panel bright with sunlight, and standing in front of it, an insane and disfigured Pinbacker who keeps rambling about God, angels, humanity, and stardust. He was the one who decoupled the airlocks. Suddenly, he attacks Kappa, managing to cut his stomach with one of the electric scalpels before Kappa runs out and asks Icarus to change the panel to full sunlight. This isn't enough to kill him, so he chases after Kappa until he enters the airlock and closes the hatch behind him. Pinbacker takes the opportunity to lock the door manually to stop Kappa from escaping before going to the coolant tank to remove the panels, which causes Icarus to shut down. Meanwhile, Corazon is staring at her burned garden when she notices a tiny little baby plant among the debris. She intends to tell the rest of the crew about it, but Pinbacker finds her and kills her by stabbing her with the scalpel. Back in the airlock, Kappa puts on the vest from one of the suits in an attempt to stop the bleeding and notices he cannot open the door as the power goes out in the entire ship. Cassie, who had been asleep, also notices the absence of power and ventures out to investigate with a flashlight in hand. When she encounters Pinbacker, she flees as quickly as possible. In the control room, Mace restarts the computer with an emergency battery, but Icarus remains unresponsive. Spotting Kappa on the security cameras, he instructs him to use the communicator on the suit helmet, allowing Kappa to relay information about Pinbacker and his interference. Upon hearing this, Mace hurries to the coolant tank and immerses himself in the freezing water to reinstall the panels Pinbacker removed. He manages to restore power just before Pinbacker catches up with Cassie in the Earth room and attempts to attack her. Fortunately, he becomes disoriented by the shadows and grabs Trey instead. Cassie seizes the scalpel Trey had used and stabs Pinbacker before fleeing again, hiding in the room with a bomb. As his body slowly freezes to death because his leg is trapped in the coolant tank, Mace manages to reach Kappa to inform him they're in orbit, but the computer is offline. He expresses uncertainty about getting it operational again, so Kappa will need to detach the payload from the ship and detonate it manually. Mace dies while pleading with Kappa to complete the mission. Kappa dons the astronaut suit and uses a torch to create a hole in the door leading to the hallway. He then removes the cover from the emergency button and secures himself to the wall before pressing it. This ejects the main hatch, and the combination of external pressure and the hole in the metal causes the hallway door to burst open, restoring Kappa's access to the ship. After discovering Mace's frozen body, Kappa heads to the control room and initiates the separation procedure. He then leaps out of the ship into the now detached bomb room as Icarus II is engulfed by the sun's intense heat. Inside the bomb, he removes his suit and approaches Cassie, who sits on the floor looking lost. He barely has a chance to speak to her when Pinbacker surprises them, seizing Kappa by the neck and edging him towards the abyss, speaking of the sun as if it were his deity. In that moment, Cassie snaps out of her daze and rushes to Kappa's aid. Together, they manage to break his grip by tearing the skin off one of his arms. With the bomb hurtling towards the sun, and amidst the violent shaking, Cassie urges Kappa to finish it. He spots Pinbacker waiting for him near the edge of the bomb, but chooses to disregard him and focus on the mission. Kappa hurries to the controls and initiates the payload. The bomb detonates, and Kappa witnesses the sun reignite, even reaching out to it before his demise. Back on Earth, Kappa's sister watches his message once more before taking her children to witness the sunrise for the first time in years.